So the update details are here for 3.2. Downtime will begin at the usual times for the global server and lasting approximately 5 hours. This does indeed bring the 1-year anniversary with some special events and a bunch of bug fixes and changes along with weapon balancing, including stealth fixes, staff buffs, massive wand buffs, some slight orb nerfs, and a cap to the crossbow. So let's get into the details. And I also want to share some of my own DPS tests and the times I'm getting on these 6 classes, which is the main focus of these changes, and I'll be doing those tests again after this update drops to see how impactful those changes are. But first, let's jump into the details of the new update. Again, this is for the global server, and we're getting that 1-year anniversary since the game officially launched free to play on the 1st of October 2024. Kinda crazy, it's already been a year. So the Fortune's Calling event returns, but this time, at least Tico promised that we wouldn't be able to spend Solent to get those Fortune Stones, meaning it's a much more level playing field, and anybody who can partake in all of the events and activities should have their chance to get the golden Archboss weapon selection chest. You should be able to view in the Mirror Boutique here in the Illusions Workshop all of these golden Archboss weapons already. Unfortunately, they don't seem to have added the golden orb, at least not yet. Maybe we will get one for the Cordy orb. This is how it looks normally. There will also be some login rewards containing fireworks, emojis, a headband, and other rewards like anniversary housing cake, profile frame, unlock stones, entropy shards, chaos prisms, obsidian fragments, and conversion stones. More details on values tomorrow, with that orange hide and seek event returning with the ability to even get an Amatoy selection chest. Then looking at some general fixes. We have seen the majority of these from the Korean patch notes, but we have a bug fix here which should address some of those issues where people were having too many requests on the party board and then couldn't queue. So when you accept a Vanguard via the party board, it should now cancel all other pending party board applications. There's a bug fix with Celia, will no longer take you out of combat when you summon her, and some people were using that to be able to, say, drink milk while in combat by using her to get out of combat and then restore your mana. They have added bulk processing for certain recipes, but just be aware your great success rate goes to 0%, meaning you won't have a chance to sell any of it. You'll now properly get XP when mining nodes from Gigantrite, and do note they have significantly improved the rewards you can get from the whale when it drops down a bunch of ores on the floor, even getting like entropy shards and chaos prisms. There were some slight adjustments to the dungeon and the raid, like in the first boss of that raid, the blue and red markers should properly appear. With Dimensional Trials, there's some slight adjustments with these, like Thorn Armor, you'll properly get a warning now, and it's capped at 10 triggers per second. And then looking at some item adjustments. Some accessories did display they had a material effect, like this necklace has iron, but there was no weapon to actually take advantage of that material effect, and so they'll be removing it. The Lucian's Greatsword, that silence effect will now only trigger for magic users, so orbed wands and staffs. You will not be able to silence melee and range skills. Then the Lucian's Wand. This effect is getting improved to 3 seconds rather than 2, but will no longer scale with buff duration. And the Grand Aelon's Bow. It will now apply that heal to everybody affected by your Nature's Blessing. But then some combat changes, so this is where the buffs and nerfs occur. Looking at Dagger, they got that fix where you won't accidentally trigger a basic attack immediately after entering that stealth and thus immediately exit stealth again. With Smokescreen, the specialization should properly be affected by buff duration for the back attack, and Dexterous Power will properly work at 89 dexterity. With Crossbow, they've capped Selfless Diffusion, not the cooldown effect, just the debuff extension, meaning you'll only be able to extend your weaken effects by 5 seconds maximum, which actually has no real impact on Orb Crossbow. It more so affects Battleweaver, where you can't store up your damage and deal it in one big hit, but it ultimately does not change the amount of damage you're dealing over time. Staff then gets these pretty big buffs for monster damage in PvE, for your serial firebombs, focused firebombs, and fireball barrage, along with the wand and tome. I don't know why they add tome here, but it's getting some massive buffs with regards to it getting 100% monster damage increase to all of its curses. And this, yes, does include your Decaying Touch, along with your Tevant's Wand, the upgraded version and the basic version. So anybody using a wand for Curse Explosion will effectively get their damage doubled from the wand with this update. In terms of Orb, just a slight nerf to Stellar Dash, down from 10% to 8% per stack, and a pretty big nerf to Temporal Leap. It will no longer reduce its own cooldown and will only affect attack and control skills. So all of these healing and support abilities you may use, particularly on Wand Orb, will no longer be affected by the cooldown reduction. It's a pretty massive Orb Wand healer nerf when you're on like a budget build and you don't already have a ton of cooldown. And otherwise, Time Bomb is getting properly fixed, so you can use that to nuke your enemies when you're on a high HP build in PvP. It's pretty useless in PvE. And that was the entirety of the patch notes for 3.2, the second update of Tier 3. Again, jumping back to these values here, my tests on these 6 classes, they are basically what are getting affected the most via this update. Your crossbow, staff, wand, and orb. You get 6 different classes from those combinations. Oracle as a damage dealer is pretty solid, getting all those extra hits from the orb along with basic attacks, combining it with all the curses and the explosions from the wand. They synergize pretty well. The main issue is mana drain. And personally, you can see all of the tests I have done here. We get an average of about 48 seconds to kill a dummy. Yes, you can sometimes get lucky and you see like 37 seconds, 36 seconds, as I displayed earlier. And that's like it with most classes. Sometimes you get really lucky, but it's very interesting to look at the actual average. And keep in mind, this is my Oracle DPS build right here with this gear, this orb, and my legendary wand, which normally has this buff duration rune. Then looking at Fury here, so we'll switch to that setup. This is the same gear we use here. I have only just switched over to my new ring instead of a Celestial Light one, and I'm in the process of upgrading that one, so not really sure which is better to use right now of the two. But again, it has that legendary wand and it has the Archboss crossbow, which in some cases may not actually be that great, but it does provide the extra weaken where it provides then the extra cooldown, which is pretty impactful. And I tried looking at, say, a crossbow that gives extra just flat attack speed, like this one right here, would cause you to have a significant amount more basic attacks when you go from 0.235 to then 0.189. But this thing's not fully upgraded, not traded, not even having runes, so I didn't find it to be very effective. But nonetheless, my times on Fury are pretty close to what I'm getting on Oracle, with the average at 53 seconds. Although I probably want to throw out these tests, they were with that Tier 3 crossbow, so our average actually goes down to like 50 seconds. Again, my gear is not that much different to like my Tier 2 tests. We can still get as low as nearly 40 seconds, but with that Touch of Despair nerf now being capped at just 15 seconds, we did see a drop in our overall damage output. But again, this update with Wand is pretty massive, where the majority of Fury's damage comes from curses, so it will be very interesting to see where this lies after this update drops. And then we look at Crucifix. This one is pretty much the top performer. Again, that's the gear I'm using right now on Crucifix, with just a Tier 2 orb, not really having any effective traits, and I don't even have 70 perception. Nothing I can really do about that, as I have maxed out the amount of points, and you really want to have 70 perception to get that extra 26 heavy attack damage. So I am missing quite a bit of overall damage on Crucifix, but nonetheless, it is seriously effective. And these were the kind of dummy times I was getting, with the average about 37 seconds, which is just insane compared to like Fury and Oracle as the previous ones. This should not be really changing, as this update just gives it a slight nerf. So maybe we'll see a few seconds longer as our average dummy times. Then looking at Enigma, I didn't do an awful lot of tests here. I really don't like the gameplay too much, as it really just feels spammy. Orb and staff don't really synergize too well with each other. So you're basically just spamming your staff skills and spamming your orb skills. The only real difference is you're gaining the extra cooldown of high focus that also affect your orb skills. You do have the option of using Temporal Elite, but I haven't really found that very useful. Maybe outside of a dummy test where you can make more use of Hellfire Rain, but on a dummy test you can't. Hellfire Rain is pretty random. You don't know whether you're getting like 2 extra hits on the dummy, or maybe you get super lucky and hit all 12 of those extra meteors, and then it can deal upwards of like 500,000 damage. But here it might only deal like 50,000 damage. So if we look at the average dummy times, these could be like 20 seconds lower, just because Hellfire Rain would actually hit all of its meteors on a fat boss. So I'm not really sure where to conclude, but right now on dummy times, this is what I was getting, just under 60 seconds, which isn't the best, but again, I don't have the optimal gear with just the foci staff and just a tier 2 orb. No like legendary weapon like I would have the legendary wand for Oracle and Fury. Then we look at Invocator. I do feel pretty comfortable playing the class, as I have done so for quite a while. You can see the gear setup here. We do have the legendary wand, which is not ideal. Again, I would have like usually a skill damage boost and heavy attack rune on there as I switch them slightly, and I would have more base damage because of max mana runes instead of mana regen. I need to switch them around a little bit when I'm switching between the builds. But yeah, Invocator, again, kind of struggles to get good times here in dummies because of that Hellfire Rain. And we're getting about 1 minute 15 seconds. Again, this is without any extra like buff food or Stellaride, Guardian, none of that. But Hellfire Rain, again, could reduce that cooldown by like 10 to 15 seconds. And this update, where both staff's getting a buff and wand is getting a buff, will give some pretty big boosts to Invocator. So it'll be interesting to see where those numbers and tests lie after this. I might do some more tests before tomorrow and these changes come about on both these classes, maybe even Battleweaver 2, which we'll have a look at now. This is my Battleweaver setup. Again, not the most optimal, but we were getting these dummy times with an average about 1 minute 25. But Battleweaver relies very heavily on Hellfire Rain because you get the opportunity to cast it a lot more often due to the cooldown reduction of both Selfless and High Focus, and without it being very effective on the dummies, because again, it's very hit or miss of how many meteors actually hit the dummy because they're pretty small. Then Battleweaver is just overall losing a ton of dummy time because it's missing all that damage. So you could probably even have like 30 seconds here cut off this dummy time when looking at like bosses. So these are just my tests on my setups for each of these classes. Of course, they can be optimized way further, particularly getting better legendary gear. And again, I can't right now have a legendary weapon for every single setup because we don't have a sync system, which is a bit annoying. Which just means some of those builds are missing quite a lot of stats, a lot of base damage too. So it's pretty hard to get accurate tests between them, but we can at least have a look at what this update's going to do in terms of changing those times, at least for me. But yeah, right now, clearly Crucifix, Orb and Crossbow wins with quite a big lead ahead of these other classes. And out of them all, Fury is definitely going to be impacted the most, probably reducing that time by about 20 seconds or so. So we'll see if it will have better damage than my Crucifix. It may very well, particularly because again, I have the legendary wand. So we'll see you guys tomorrow, and thanks all for watching, with another special thank you to all these channel members for your extra support, and we'll see you guys around.